Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. What's going on, guys? What's going on, chaps? Back on the Turbo Trainer. This is the only sort of place where one can get any sort of semblance of peace and quiet. Out in the garden, look, listen. Only hear the ticking of the second hand of my clock. Today I want to talk about a subject regarding, I haven't made it any secret that I'm a driving instructor, and I'm going to talk about, it's funny, it's funny, again, you guys are joining me for my warm-up ride. It's in a really easy gear. Oop. And so this subject, got to take out the all-important, where are we? Icing. Right, so this subject involves, as instructors, we are permitted, with the permission of the student, and the examiner for that matter, to sit in on driving tests. Yeah, I kid you not. So we get to see, we have the honour and the privilege of basically witnessing how a driving test is conducted. I've been doing this line of work for about coming on 10 to 11 years now. Anyway, so I want to talk about the times where comical situations have transpired whilst I've been observing these situations. Now, I'm going to keep everyone totally anonymous. I will make no mention of any examiner's name, any student's name. So let's talk about. So on your driving test, on the new driving test now, we have a segment called the independent driving segment of the test, which is you are guided with a sat nav for around 20 minutes. The predetermined routes. Every test center has around 13 to 14 predetermined routes, and so a student will be asked to obviously get in the car. They'll do certain safety questions, and then they may begin or start the sat nav independent. So the student has to demonstrate that they can follow a sat nav without being prompted verbally by another person in the car. They can follow the sat nav, follow road signs, road markings to a particular destination. And this was brought in, remember, this was brought in by the DVSA in 2017. These changes were done in 2017 September. A number of changes that took place. Initially, I think a lot of instructors were up in arms about it, that it's just a total waste of time, but actually no, not really. It adds a different dynamic, and all instructors have become, they're welcoming the entire thing really, with open arms and warm hands. Is that the expression, open arms? Yeah. They're welcoming the idea of a sat nav guided element to the driving test, and it allows the examiner to observe exactly what the individual is capable of, what the prospective driver, potential driver, is capable of in terms of competency and skills and knowledge and experience. Anyway, this was piloted in 2017. No, not in pilot. It was piloted prior to that, and so they done the sat nav independent driving tests, and so they took out, I think, the DVSA, if I can recollect, you can look it up, 3,500 17 to 25-year-olds who make up the sort of majority of road accidents that take place, and fatal road accidents, might I add, were piloted were surveyed, and they came back with one question, one request across the board of the 3,500 that were quizzed, surveyed, piloted, which was, could we please have some sat-nav training? Because look, we all use mobile devices. I'm recording this on a mobile device, yeah. So the DVSA decided, look, let's make. It was on the cards prior to that, a couple of years before that. In fact, they were thinking about maybe we should introduce a sat-nav element with the rise of Garmin and TomToms, and now you have Google Earth, Google Maps. You know, so maybe we should have some combination of a sat-nav and a verbally guided driving test, a combination, and I think it's fantastic. I think what the DVSA have done is absolutely fantastic. We have a hard test in the UK. I think it's pretty tough enough as it is. Remember, in the UK, and I'm going to put this out there on the record, we're better drivers. You know, I've driven in Pakistan, I've driven in downtown Lahore, and it's awful. How many thousands of people die out there? Forget about coronavirus, but how many thousands of people die out there in Pakistan? Anyway, so I want to keep some semblance of order with regards to the subject, not dilly-dally about. And the DVSA decided to, after consultation, obviously, and these piloted new driving tests as of September 2017, when they initially, when they became the de facto official driving test, the amended driving test, they were being piloted, and people who were being piloted were being literally passed and given full licenses from the provision to the full license. Anyway, so that's the background behind sat-nav guided tests. Now, getting back to the comical element of sitting in on driving tests, and I've got lots of buddies who are examiners. How can I put this? Instructors, fellow instructors, so anyway, I was on a test once in the back, and the student had advised me, could you please come along with me? You know, I just want you to observe things. And unfortunately, the student did fail the test. I'm going to say that now from the outset. No names mentioned of examiners, anyone else. Anyway, so we started the test, and the examiner had taken out the sat-nav, placed it on the dashboard, placed the sat-nav on the dashboard, and advised the student, okay, I'd like you to follow the sat-nav until otherwise advised. Okay, and then I'll give you instruction independently, and the drive will last for around 20 minutes. Verbatim, there or thereabouts, exact words that they state. Anyway, so the student is he's kind of excited. It's odd, really. It's there's so much tension that you could cut the atmosphere with a meat cleaver. So this particular student goes, okay, yeah, he nods his head. Well, all of a sudden he's very excited. And so we move away. He does all his normal safety checks, looks over his right, you know, all round observations, looks over his right shoulder just before he moves away, and moves with, cool enough. Come to the end of the road, takes a right. Examiner tells him, no, the sat-nav is speaking. At this moment, the sat-nav is guiding him. So you all know how the TomTom works. So the TomTom's guiding him, and it states, so I remember the scenario here. It states that TomTom states that, okay, at the end of the road, I would like you, at the end of the road, in that TomTom female neutral tone of a voice, at the end of the road, please turn left. No, at the end of the road, please turn right. Okay, so he turns right. Okay, and then the TomTom guides him. At the end of this road, in 300 yards, please turn left. No, in 300 yards, please turn right. And this is a student goes to the examiner. I'm gonna turn right in 300 yards. Yeah? The examiner nods his head in agreement, like that. Yes. Another 100 yards down the road. We haven't got to the end of the road here, and we've still got another 300, 200, 100, 0. Junction, giveaway line, turn right. So that's the scenario that we've got. So we come to 100 yards. I'm sitting there in the back. Okay, you know, he's asked him. I hope he doesn't ask him again, because this is not going to be appreciated by the examiner if he doesn't zip it and just listen to the sat nav. And I'll talk about this in a minute. So the sat nav then goes. The sat nav in its monotone, neutral, female, maybe a Dutch accent, maybe not. I want to put a sample of the segment of the it's the common default voice prompted tone that you get recorded, you know, instructions that you get. It's the female voice. I think you're all familiar with it. It's on the old TomTom TomTom Goes 600 TomTom Goes, I think that's what it's called, and that's what the DVSA use. Anyway, so at the end of the road, please. I don't know if this examiner was having a bad day. He wasn't. He actually wasn't. I had a chat with him outside the car before we got in, and at the end of in 200 yards, so we're driving down the road. The first instruction has been given by the sat nav: in 300 yards, turn right at the end of the road. So we're driving along. We've got to the 200 yard stage now. At 200 yards, in 200 yards, turn right. Okay, and then the student turns around and goes to the examiner. I'm gonna turn right at the end of this road. I'm gonna turn right. Yeah, and he points at himself, and he's taking his eye off the road and looking at the examiner, which the examiner wasn't happy about. The car's going forward at around 12 or 15 miles an hour, and you're turning around and having a discussion with me. Anyway, so by this time, the examiner looks back at me and goes, "Like, for real, you brought this sort of guy on a test." Anyway, so I'm just praying now that this idiot of a student doesn't say anything more, doesn't annoy the examiner. Tensions are starting to rise slowly. We haven't got to the boiling point just yet. We get to the 100 yard point just prior to the giveaway line, and the examiner, the sat nav goes off again. In 100 yards, please turn. We're around 2.5 car lengths before the giveaway line, and he's got to turn right. So the sat nav goes off again. At the end of the road, turn right, and just before the student's about to open his mouth, he goes, "I'm gonna," and the examiner goes, "Right," and sits back in his seat like this. And now I'm wishing, just please let me out the goddamn car. Let me out the damn car, please. I need to get out the damn car. Why did this idiot of a student of mine, why did he have to just... Anyway, anyway, so this guy, he ends up failing his test, and he ended up failing his test on the basis that he failed to follow instructions. Failing to follow the sat nav. You lot may think that this is pretty brutal, pretty down the line. Look, as an experienced driver, I got my license in 89. In 89, that's 11, 21. Wow, that's like 32 years almost. I've had a license, a full driving license. Got my license in 89, and so you know, they're not going to give you licenses if you can't follow a sat nav on your own. Can you imagine the amount of danger you'll be causing to life or limb, inside and out of the car, potentially, if you're wondering if you can't follow a sat nav? You know, let's just say you want to go from Wembley to Brent Cross. You may not know the way there, you know, and who are you going to speak to then? Can you imagine the confusion that's going to happen between you following the sat nav, road signs, and you're confused? You could end up rear-ending a car, or hitting the curb, or swerving at a roundabout. They're not going to give any Tom, Dick and Harry a license, and they're not going to give people a license who keep on. Examiners will say this, okay? Once a student fails, okay, rightly so, and I support the DVSA in every decision that they make. Once a student fails, okay, once a student fails, they'll get out of the car and the first thing they'll say is that that felt more like a driving lesson than a driving test. So make sure that you take your training with a good instructor, you know, and that you're basically not made an arse of on the day of your test. They get a hard enough time as it is. I feel I really, my heart goes out to the examiners. I support each and every one of them. You know, I'm teaching my daughter at the moment, and it's going to be no different for her than anyone else. Honestly, when she goes for a test, do you think I'm going to blurt out to the examiner, "Hey, that's my daughter, pass her"? It doesn't work like that. And don't expect us to do you any favors as well. We can only work with what we have. If you're rubbish, you're rubbish. It's going to take a lot longer for you to get ready. Just do your damn lessons and, you know, learn something from the experience of failing. Failure has taught me more than any victory in my life. You know, how do you think all these champions got up there? You know, people say, "Oh, that's a really, really negative act." No. Embrace failure. Embrace it. It's not the worst thing in the world. You haven't got cancer. God forbid you're not in a slightly deviating. You're not in a hospital, you know, on your front, being turned over by 9 nurses and surgeons so you can breathe. You're not on a ventilator, you know, suffering from the effects of coronavirus and, you know, fighting for your life. It's a driving test. And if you're not good enough, you're too dangerous to be out there on the roads. So I endorse the decisions that the DVSA make. I thought it was just sort of one parable that I wanted to share with you guys. I think it's quite funny. I've got a whole lot of others, but really and truly, I don't really talk about my profession and what I do. But I suppose it's a life experience. It doesn't make any harm of making any mention of it. But, you know, don't turn your driving test into the most expensive lesson that you're ever going to take. It's a driving test. Make sure that you're ready for it, and don't be a Jack the Lad. You know, the sat nav is part and parcel of the test to come for decades now, and I think it's a fantastic thing. It's a great thing. Gets you to think independently. Don't always be reliant on the voice of your instructor, on the voice of the examiner. The examiner is not your instructor. Your stuff should have happened with me or with your instructor. All your mistakes should have been ironed out, made pristine, made A star, 110% by the time you get to your driving test. Okay? Look, that's all I've got to say on the matter. Yeah, if you are asking, the student did eventually pass on the second attempt. Did pass on the second attempt, but he didn't quiz the examiner. It was someone else this time around, but he didn't quiz the examiner this time around. So yeah, tales of a driving instructor. Okay, I'm gonna leave you and love you. That's enough warm up that I've done. Real men ride bikes.